Welcome to DeProgram. I'm Michelle Witte. I'm joined by Ted Rall and John Kiriakou. Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Good.
We definitely haven't been talking for the last 15 minutes.
Not at all.
No. And what we haven't been talking about is what we're about to get into, if you want the Kamala Harris version of the intro here. We're going to talk a little bit about the sort of snowballing Doge, how people are treating it, what it really has the potential to be. I am interested in, so all week the story has been that, Disney and ABC are cowards and villains for capitulating and settling this Trump defamation lawsuit. The New York Times today had a story about how actually maybe they were just throwing themselves on a First Amendment grenade. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask what you guys think about that. We do, God help us, have another potential government shutdown coming. And then we have a couple of headlines coming at us. Of course, we've got federal charges for Luigi Mangione that we'll try and get into here. A really sad story about insurers dropping homeowners over basically the results of climate change, over things like increased wildfire danger and hurricane danger. And then we have a cute little, one of these stories that I think we're all going to miss from the Wall Street Journal, a story about how the White House managed with a diminished president, which is really something I think that has been unfortunately normalized. I was too young to really remember the Reagan era, so I wasn't like reading headlines at that time. So I know we have been through something like this before.
It wasn't anything like this.
No. All right. Well, good. No. Good, because this is pretty brutal. And again, it's like, it's sort of like a review of the literature, and that none of this stuff is really brand new reporting. It's just that if you made a big fuss about it at any single point, right, any single issue, the conversation was really effectively derailed by accusations of like fake news. And I guess you're like a Trump fascist, et cetera, et cetera. So that's
and an ageist.
Yeah. And an ageist.
Oh, an ageist. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. What do you want to do? Doge? You want to hear about Trump, Disney, and ABC? You want to talk about the government shutdown? Where do you want to start?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I think Doge, this is the so-called Department of Government efficiency, right? That's headed jointly by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. I think it goes hand in hand with the shutdown story. Democrats and Republicans came to an agreement several days ago to fund the government into the new year so it doesn't shut down. It's scheduled to shut down at midnight on Saturday. Donald Trump, apparently not realizing that he's not the head of the legislative branch of government, said, no, you're not going to pass that stopgap spending measure. Now, Donald Trump's not president yet. So he doesn't have the authority to veto this thing. He doesn't have any authority at all. He doesn't have a governmental position yet. And being the good lapdogs that they are, the Republican leadership in the House said, okay, we won't allow this to come to a vote. We're going to renegotiate with the Democrats. The Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, said, oh, no, you don't. We have a deal. We negotiated a deal. Just because your boss decided that he doesn't like it doesn't mean that we have to renegotiate the deal. And so now it looks like the government is going to shut down at midnight on Saturday. On the Senate side, and this is very interesting to me, John Thune, the senator from South Dakota, is the new Senate Majority Leader. John Thune has always had a reputation as being somebody who can work across the aisle. And John Thune said, this is nuts. Every time the government shuts down, the Republicans take it on the chin. Donald Trump is not the president. The deal's been negotiated. We need to vote yes. So the problem's not on the Senate side. The problem is on the House side. Now, just to make sure that everybody understands what a terrible position Speaker Mike Johnson is in, it looks like he just simply can't survive this. Donald Trump endorsed Johnson 2 weeks ago. And so Johnson was reelected Speaker and Republican leader by acclamation, right? There wasn't even a formal vote. It was just all those in favor say aye. Everybody said aye. All those opposed, nay. Nobody said nay. He's the Speaker. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene came out this morning and said that she's going to nominate Elon Musk to be the Speaker of the House. There's a rule in the House that the Speaker of the House does not have to be a member of the House. It can be anybody. It can be one of us. If somebody were to nominate us and a majority were to vote yes.
Do they even have to be a U.S. citizen? Could we get one of these migrants off the street?
Anybody off the street can be the Speaker of the House, thanks to our living and breathing Constitution. And so, listen, Elon Musk is not going to be the Speaker of the House. But what that means is people are willing to vote no on Mike Johnson. So Johnson is damned if he obeys Trump, and he's damned if he defies Trump. And we'll see how this plays out in the coming few days.
Yeah, I love the fact that the Trump team is already, they're prematurely, after having won a sweeping election, committing political suicide. Yeah. I mean, literally they're going to get beaten up worse than ever. If the Democrats don't screw up and they just sit back and watch and just, popcorn time. I mean, it's Trump is the president of the United States a month from now.
That's right.
I mean, he's the one who inherits this mess, and the Democrats don't have to do a thing. It's awesome for the Democrats if they don't screw it up, which they have a habit of doing.
Yeah, they always do. Yeah. It's funny to me that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have no budget. They have no office. They have no official position.
They're assholes without portfolio.
Yeah, assholes without portfolio. And yet, all of a sudden, they're two of the most powerful men in the world.
I mean, it's an interesting sort of media mechanism because, to the extent that they don't have any actual power, they can hang out and have whatever conversations they want to have and take magnifying glasses to whatever budgets they want to, which is fine, right? Go ahead. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff to find.
Sure.
But, they can't do anything, but they can make a big fuss. They can make a big fuss over this expenditure and do whatever, which is, it's a tactic Republicans were taking when they weren't in power, right? We talked about this over the last 4 years of the Biden administration, how a lot of these committees and a lot of the sort of impeachment stuff about Biden wasn't really ever undertaken with any real hope of impeaching the man, but just of creating a sort of media storm. But then when you're the ones who are holding the levers, it's maybe not such a useful mechanism to have because you're going to be the ones held responsible.
Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader, Republican representative from Louisiana, said this morning that, well, wait a minute, what we can do is we'll come up with a special bill that will fund disaster relief and congressional pay raises. Now they haven't had a raise since 2009. I don't care.
Who cares? They make $174,000
neither have
a year.
minimum wage workers.
Who cares? Yeah,
that's right. And Hakeem Jeffrey said, no, that's not going to happen.
Speaking of disaster relief, so I just for fun was looking at some of the amendments to the NDAA that are ongoing here. And one one now maybe I'm just missing something.
The big defense bill for people who don't know.
Exactly.
The
acronyms.
National Defense Authorization Act.
Has to be passed every year, has all the money.
$916 billion.
Right. There are a couple of funny things that maybe we'll get to later, but maybe one of you can tell me something, make this make sense to me. It says an amendment instituted by a Republican in North Carolina named Edwards requires the Department of Defense to conduct an assessment of the 15 counties in Western North Carolina as potential locations for future defense assets and to prepare a report for Congress. And the only thing I can come up with, maybe there's more, but it's just So this is how we're doing rebuilding, right? This is
Job
now how we're
creation.
doing disaster reconstruction, because FEMA doesn't have any money and the Small Business Administration doesn't have any money and nobody has any money except the Pentagon. So our support for Western North Carolina in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene is going to see whether they should be locations for defense assets. That just struck me as very dystopian.
Very cynical. So what they're saying is, well, there's no money, as you said, there's no money for FEMA for disaster relief. But if we build a giant new military base in Western North Carolina and hire everybody into the Pentagon, then that's good enough. That'll do it.
Yeah.
It's either that or build more prisons.
Yeah. God forbid anything but the Pentagon ever get money. You know what? On the Doge tip, I mean, I don't know if anyone's got like a defense of Doge or the potential of Doge, but like just in the last day, Business Insider, I think they were the ones breaking the story. Vulture had it also, has a story on how much money Lil Wayne and Chris Brown got. So two like R&B hip hop stars who got millions of dollars in pandemic aid, because there was this pandemic aid that was, I just saw the story not too long ago, so I have like the rough outlines of it. But basically, I mean, we all know there was massive fraud in government pandemic aid, which doesn't mean that people didn't need it. It just means it needed to be administered better and not just handed out.
I'm going to push back on that. I think if we go in the way back when machine to early 2020, when the economy shut down, there was a whole idea that maybe, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, and all these other giant cash slush funds needed to be means tested. But I think that would have been a huge mistake. It would have tied the money up. The economy was seizing up. At a certain point, you have to just throw torrents, tsunamis of cash into people's pockets. And it's not even a bug. It's a feature that some of it goes to scumbags. It doesn't matter. You need money to be moving through the arteries of the economy, and you can't have any delays. And it's okay if some people steal it. I think it was that what we were facing down the barrel of was that bleak. And I don't think they were wrong.
I mean, certainly they did that for Wall Street. No, I don't mean that you should make any, that you should winnow down a program to make it so mean that nobody can game the system and leave out, 90% of deserving people. But it was like anybody who had a lawyer to write up this stuff for them could get literally millions of dollars. These two men who are millionaires themselves got millions of dollars, while people were waiting for months for unemployment insurance to come through.
Yes.
This is what I mean by administer it better. Just have more staff, right?
Well, they didn't have any
more
staff. They
to
sent all their staff. Remember, Michelle, they sent all their staff home.
But have more staff in the first place. You know what I mean? Like, have actually people to administer and run programs rather than just, it's like, I don't know. I was having a conversation the other night about, with somebody who works in the restaurant industry who was opposed to this initiative in Washington, D.C. that was very controversial to raise tipped workers' wages to the minimum. And, which I support and still do support. But he was saying, I was part of a crew of people who we didn't want this to happen, because the problem, in his opinion, the problem was not that there weren't adequate laws and regulations. The problem is enforcement. If you're enforcing the laws that you already have on the books, you don't need new ones. And these new laws are actually, if they're not also going to be enforced by anybody, they're just going to be paid for by the lowest, the person furthest down the totem pole that you can get the money out of, which I think, I'm not swayed that tipped workers should still be making $1 an hour, but I do think it's very easy to compel something on a piece of paper.
True.
And you have the likes of Doge going through and wanting to sort of nickel and dime funding and staffing for all of these programs. And that's how you have, more and more laws on the books that won't do anything because we're not enforcing the existing ones. So I didn't want
to. That's a very big, you're bringing up a lot of huge issues there, right?
What?
That we could go on forever to talk about. But just Doge itself, I think the biggest concern is that we're going to end up with a Javier Milei austerity on steroids situation that will kill the American economy. I mean, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 2,900 points over the last 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, it is.
The interest rates the real estate market is still completely seized up. It's been frozen for 2.5 years. There's no sign that that's going to improve anytime in the near future. There's lots of economic jitters surrounding, globally, the incoming Trump administration. This is not what worries me. Is that the federal government employs a lot of people directly and indirectly. And if you start shutting down agencies and departments and gutting them, you're just going to put the American people out of work. I mean, this could be catastrophic if it's not just two jerks fucking around, which it feels like it probably is, but I don't know. Or
it's a brilliant good cop, bad cop setup by Donald Trump. So you can have Elon and Vivek saying like, well, we can't spend this or that on this or that entitlement. And then you have Donald Trump standing up as the defender of the people saying, no, you can't take Social Security. No, you can't take Medicare. No, the people need this, which I'm sure it's not, but wouldn't that be great? And it would give him some great opportunities to posture. And he's not, I don't think that this is that kind of setup, but it could sort of turn into something like that. And he clearly does have an instinct for taking credit at opportune moments, like making sure his signature was on all those checks that people got.
Also, he doesn't administer a team. He likes his subordinates, his cabinet heads, to be competing against each other. Yeah. And he's above the whole fray, and everybody's trying to curry favor with him. There's a lot of leaders who, historically have preferred that trend. People make a lot of Hitler comparisons with Trump, and I think, 99% of them fail. But this one succeeds. Hitler was the same way. He liked to see his underlings fight each other for his favor.
What is that, a cabinet of rivals?
Team
of rivals.
Team of rivals.
Hitler and Abraham
Team
Lincoln.
Of rivals to each other, not a team.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we should send somebody after Lil Wayne and Chris Brown for taking millions of dollars.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They didn't need. All right.
Yes.
But do you guys have strong thoughts on the ABC Disney defamation case? I was very curious, actually, about your take on this, Ted, because we usually talk to you about defamation cases that are legitimate, like defamation cases against media outlets that really should be taken seriously, like Sarah Palin's we talked about recently against the New York Times, where they tried to accuse her of instigating violence against Gabby Giffords by putting her in some kind of crosshairs. And as we spoke to you about it, like, you could really demonstrate that there was malice in that case. So
that case is alive again, by the way.
Yeah, it keeps getting, doesn't it keep getting, like, the judge keeps trying to shut it down, and then it keeps getting pushed back by the appeals court?
The appellate division sees the wisdom in it, and the lower court is very politicized.
So let me lay out this. New York Times has this little story, the insider story, on how Disney, the owner of ABC, decided to settle this defamation case that Donald Trump had brought. They have been excoriated for this online. You've had people calling them cowards and capitulators, because rather than defending what a lot of people consider to be a very strong case, Disney decided to settle with Trump by donating $15 million to his presidential library, paying $1 million to cover his legal fees, and issuing some kind of statement of regret. This was apparently not a decision that was elevated to a company board vote. It came down from Disney's general counsel and was approved by Bob Iger, who's Disney's CEO. And what the New York Times says is that, this Florida judge kept refusing to dismiss this lawsuit. And they were concerned that if a jury in Florida, which is very friendly to Donald Trump, sided with the president.
And to libel plaintiffs. Don't forget the Gawker case with Hulk Hogan.
Oh, was that in Florida?
It was.
Okay, well, there you go. So according to the Times, right, they weren't actually just being big pussies. They actually were, trying to avoid a potentially larger sum that maybe a jury would have decided. But also, apparently, in the worst case scenario, Disney concluded that fighting the case could lead to the Supreme Court and then could become a vehicle for Trump and his allies to overturn the landmark First Amendment decision in New York Times versus Sullivan, which is a ruling from 1964 that made it much harder.
Abomination and should be overturned.
For public figures like Trump to win libel lawsuits. Now, I don't know. It has also been posited that Disney just really didn't want to go through the discovery process because the timing of this was so quick, right? This judge refused to dismiss the case and on Friday denied a request by Disney to delay proceedings and said, no, you need to hand over any relevant documents by Sunday. Mm-hmm. Disney responded by immediately reopening settlement negotiations, and by Saturday, they had a deal. Mm-hmm. So either we take them at their word, and we're very worried that this was going to go to the Supreme Court and that they were going to overturn this New York Times versus Sullivan ruling, or you had a bunch of emails from George Stephanopoulos, who's the figure at the center of this defamation allegation. You had a bunch of emails saying like, fuck that guy. I know the jury didn't find for rape, but really they did find for rape, et cetera, et cetera. And they just didn't want it getting out because, then they would have a real case on their hands.
Well, I do think it's important to recall like how we got here, right?
Yeah.
Stephanopoulos on his morning show this week, as you said, Michelle, repeatedly, at least 15 times, said that Trump had been found liable for rape in a civil court.
And that was after he was repeatedly warned not to use the word rape.
That's a huge problem. And New York state law, where, by the way, it's not coincidental that Stephanopoulos lives and is broadcasting out of a New York studio, or actually, he's probably in Washington. But
no, he's in New York.
Oh, he's in New York?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So Stephanopoulos, under New York law, it's not true that Trump was found liable for rape at all. He was found liable for sexual assault, which is not rape in New York law. That's a different count.
Right.
I mean, Stephanopoulos was way over his skis when he said that.
Well, I would agree, except that, one, New York State has a pretty narrow definition of what rape is. And Trump tried to sue E. Jean Carroll, right, who's the woman who this all started because she said that Trump raped her in a dressing room at Bergdorf's, I think,
in 1996.
20 years ago or something, a long time ago.
Yeah.
She brought a civil lawsuit against him. I forget what triggered that lawsuit, but anyway, this is a lower.
It was outgoing Governor Cuomo who instituted a 1-year period to eliminate the statute of limitations on these charges. So there's been a flurry of this litigation.
So this jury, decides that this probably happened, that he probably assaulted her in this dressing room. New York has a very specific definition of rape that's not just penetration, but with what, right? Mm-hmm. And so the judge even makes a note of this during the case. But then after this is decided and the jury finds for E. Jean Carroll, they find that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her, which includes him penetrating her with his fingers. I hate to be so specific, but they did not find that necessarily he penetrated her with his penis, right? They were like, we feel reasonably certain this happened. We're not sure this happened. So E. Jean Carroll goes out. She's won this victory. She said, yeah, I said Donald Trump raped me and he raped me. Donald Trump tried to countersue her, and that was dismissed because the judge said, this is a common definition of rape. This is how people commonly understand it. You're nitpicking here.
Different judge, different state, doesn't matter. Irrelevant. I mean, the point is that what matters to this situation is the Florida court, right? I mean, and I guess, and obviously ABC's Disney's defense would be, rape is not just a legal term. It's also just it's a noun in the dictionary, and Stephanopoulos was using it that way. That would be his defense, right?
Yes.
But maybe it would have worked. I'm not usually one to side with the land of the mouse, but I'm going to this time. I think that they had a strong reason to believe that they were going to lose. That when that Florida jury was going to hear that case, they were going to say, Yeah, I mean, you went too far. You should have said sexual assault, not rape. You exaggerated. The media does do that, and he was warned not to. That's really bad, as John pointed out. It reminds me a lot of the Sarah Palin thing. In the Sarah Palin case, Bennett, the editor at the Times at the time, was warned repeatedly. Oh, we don't think this is true, and he went ahead and published anyway. Like, put it to bed, right? So, I think New York Times versus Sullivan is in the crosshairs of the Supreme Court in particular. And I know this personally because it was communicated to my attorney from the U.S. Supreme Court that Justice Thomas is particularly interested in getting rid of it. He thinks it's bad case law. And my case against the LA Times, he wanted to hear it in order to, with a view to try to persuade a majority of the court to join him. When we counted the votes, we didn't get to 5. And there's a cliche in legal circles which says that, like, particularly heinous court cases make for bad case law. And I think this is what the concern of Disney was. It's like New York, because Stephanopoulos really fucked up, then, or in my case, the LA Times really fucked up. They go in front of the court. New York Times versus Sullivan disappears. And that's the bulwark of all defenses that all media outlets and journalists always use in the United States. And the anti-SLAPP statutes in every state that has one are completely based on New York Times versus Sullivan. And the whole thing goes crumbling away. The next thing you know, journalists would have to actually check their sources and make sure their facts are right. And wouldn't that screw everything up? I think that's where they were.
I think it is silly. He's talking to a national audience. You know what I mean? He's talking to a national audience and describing a case in which the, now president-elect was found liable for sticking his fingers in some woman who didn't want him to in a bathroom. And like, some states in the country would define that as rape legally, and some states in the country wouldn't. They would define it as sexual assault. I think that that's a pretty crappy case. I think that ought to be within the leeway of how you are allowed to talk about public figures, especially considering where, you're talking about like a legal definition versus, a common parlance.
But bear in mind, this is a civil case, right? In the same way that Jean Carroll, you were very careful to say, like, more likely than not, because it's a civil case, right?
Right. I don't know. I'm just saying what the jury found.
50.1% or more. Did it happen? Same thing in this case. Is this libel against, albeit against a very public figure, Donald Trump? And I think, can you get to, the criminal court standard, like beyond a reasonable doubt? No. But can you get to preponderance of the evidence? Yeah, you can get there, I think, with the right jury. And I think that's what Disney's lawyers were worried about.
I also think this, and I don't know if this is Disney's line or the New York Times line. I guess I'm going to assume it's Disney's. Otherwise, the Times is editorializing for them. But, they make a comment about deep red Florida not being a friendly place for a case against Trump, and not wanting to put anything of legal consequence in front of this Supreme Court, which is also just, of course, we all know there are friendly territories and hostile territories for different kinds of legal cases. But like, really, if it is this bad, right? This is a real condemnation of our legal system across the board, and maybe something that you ought to be paying more attention to. Like, I'm sure other people have been wronged by this. If you are that concerned that you don't want, if it would be a miscarriage of justice rather than just a decision you don't want, it does seem like this should be bigger news than when it comes up and it involves Donald Trump or Bob Iger or George Stephanopoulos. You know what I mean? But like,
the system is so like dysfunctional and doesn't work evenly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. That's just how the whole thing, you're talking about a massive systemic problem, right? Like, when I sued the LA Times, one of my burdens was that the judges were in a jurisdiction that was that's a Hollywood town. It's a media. And so all of their cases are about either IP in Hollywood or real estate. And they don't know anything about First Amendment, the media, journalism, nothing. My case had been in New York. The LA Times would have been eaten alive, but like, they didn't stand a chance even from a right-wing jury or a right-wing judge. But, LA, it was tough. you're just, it's not, as John, you have experience in court.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got a defamation case pending right now in federal court.
Are you the plaintiff or the defendant?
I'm the plaintiff, and it's been thrown out 3 times, and it's been reinstated by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals 3 times. I filed it 4.5 years ago, and I don't care if it takes 40 more years. I'm going to continue fighting.
Good.
Hey,
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, it is fucking hard to sue for defamation in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I think about people like Carol Burnett, who successfully sued the National Enquirer, I'm like, I can't. It's almost unbelievable that she accomplished that. People look at Gawker and they say, "What a terrible thing." No, I'm like, no, Hulk Hogan is a national hero for having done that, and to have gotten that far. I mean, it is.
Look at who the victors are.
And even when you even have John Oliver is on the side of these, like New York Times versus Sullivan, anti-SLAPP laws and all that. And the point is, it's like, really, truly, there are a lot of aggrieved plaintiffs who are not getting their day in court.
Well, may I add something too? A year and a half ago, a woman whom I have never met, but who has hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter, former member of the British Parliament, decided to attack me on Twitter for reasons that I have never understood. And she said that I was a Russian spy because I worked, like you did, for Sputnik Radio at the time. She said that I had committed treason against the United States and that I had already gone to prison for espionage. Okay, none of those things were true. And so I can be a litigious prick when I have to be. And so I called our friend Bruce Fine, and actually I was so angry I saw it at 2:00 in the morning, and I called him and woke him up at 2:00 in the morning, and I read him the tweets, and I said, "Do I have a defamation case?" He said, "Absolutely, you have a defamation case." And so,
did you sue her in England? You should.
No. She lives in New York.
Oh, okay.
She was a crazy Russiagate person.
Yes, a crazy Russiagate person. Exactly right. And so Bruce emailed her and said, "Everything you said was wrong. It was defamatory, and take it down." And she said, "No, I'm not going to take it down."
Okay.
And we said, "Fine." And we filed a defamation suit in the Southern District of New York. And immediately, and I mean within 2 hours of us filing the suit, she said, "Well, let's try to fix this." So she ended up pinning an apology, publishing retractions for everything she said, and she paid all my legal fees because she knew she was going to lose in New York. Now, if this had been, anywhere else, as you pointed out, Ted, I very well may have been told to just lump it. Just like
and you still would have had the challenge that even though you were in federal court, they might have decided to apply the anti-SLAPP statute to you.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Plus, with a defamation suit, you have to show an economic cost to the thing that's been said against
not with
you.
Defamation per se, though.
Well, not for defamation per se.
You must have sued for per se.
I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
I mean, anyway, proving an actual cost is almost impossible. It's like ever.
Yes.
Because you never really know.
This woman she was a really fun Twitter account to follow for a while, because she was just having delusions and writing them down, just making up incredible things.
I'm glad that you got her attention.
She's blocked me. I actually wrote about her after we settled this to say, look what this lunatic said about me, and this is what I did. And she attacked me again and just blocked me, and that's fine with me.
She's the
you
one
just want to
who
be left
said
alone.
Steve Bannon. She regretted to inform the public that Steve Bannon had been convicted of treason or something and was going to get the death penalty.
Yeah. She's not. In her Twitter bio, it just says unhinged British witch. She used to be a member of Parliament with the Conservative Party. She has a long history of drug abuse and mental illness, and she left her husband to run off with the road manager for Metallica. She moved to New York, divorced him, took all of his money, and just lives on that, and just spends all day long screaming at people on Twitter.
So she is the unhinged British witch.
She is. She's an unhinged British witch. Yes. Yes.
It's awesome.
She was the kind of person who was elevated during Russiagate as well. Like she got an
That's
op-ed
right.
in the New York Times.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Well, then how do you guys feel about Trump's next legal move, which was to file a lawsuit against the Des Moines Register, the parent company of the Des Moines Register, and Ann Seltzer?
Yeah, this is a tough one. He can't win this.
No.
This seems ridiculous.
It'll be dismissed on summary judgment, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he's accusing them of fraud. He's suing them under Iowa's Consumer Fraud Act, but he's using that to claim that publishing this very wrong poll was somehow election interference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many jumps that he would have to prove, first and foremost, that there's an inherent damage to your account, to your campaign by being underpolled. I don't think anyone could prove that. Political scientists might say it's to your advantage to be viewed as the underdog, because then your people might be more likely to vote. And then you'd have to prove that that either the register and or the pollster in this case knew that the numbers were wrong and published them anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably not true. And no, there's just no way.
No, I agree.
I don't know why he did it.
I think it's part of this. I think it's part of this new policy of just attacking everybody who attacks him. Mm-hmm. I think that's what he's going to do.
Yeah.
And we'll see where it sticks. I mean, and hopefully he sticks only where it is valid, because he has been attacked. There were people who have been playing sort of fast and loose with the facts about Donald Trump for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, of course, true. I don't think that, it doesn't mean I welcome like Jeff Bezos sitting down, the owner of the Washington Post, who is, competing for government contracts with Elon Musk, going to sit down and have friendly chats with Donald Trump. But yeah, that is what.
Well, it was easier to have that chat after he told the Post not to endorse Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Yes. Not to endorse anyone.
In fact, Jeff Bezos is having dinner with him tonight at Mar-a-Lago.
Is he?
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know where my invitation went.
It's in the mail.
Thank you. Phew.
Well, I was going to say it's going to be delivered by Amazon, but I think their workers are on strike.
Yeah, they did. They started that today. I don't know if it's everywhere, if it's just the Teamsters, whoever's represented by the Teamsters in Amazon.
I don't know. It seems like it's a big deal, though.
Everybody's waiting for their last minute Christmas presents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
All right. You guys, do you care about Fani Willis not being allowed to continue this election case in Georgia?
I'm surprised it took this long. I mean, she had such a clear conflict of interest. I can't believe she made it as long as she did. She shouldn't be on this case.
I mean, it is, to be fair, it's also not technically over. This was, I guess,
that's right.
The judge said she could continue, but, basically pressured her to get rid of the lead prosecutor because they had this relationship that was improper. A 3-judge panel overruled that it could go to the full appeals panel. I haven't seen whether it is going to or not.
No, this was the appeals. This was the appeals.
Or it could go to the full. It could go to the
to
full
the state
court.
Supreme Court. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does look like. I mean, I got to hand it to Fani Willis, man. She just, she's shameless. She just doesn't care. What people think of her.
She doesn't.
Kind of amazing. It is overdue, though. I mean, she should have been long gone.
It just is. Yeah. I mean, I don't really. I don't know that I was ever convinced that how it might have affected the case against Trump adversely. It certainly helped Donald Trump, but it just seemed, like an incredibly sloppy way.
I hated the theory of the case. I hate RICO. I hate the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah. But her having a weird relationship with her lead prosecutor, doesn't really affect that. You know what I mean? It was all sort of tawdry, and I'm open to being convinced of how it links back to the case in any way that
it's
doesn't
just a gotcha.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But it's a big
but
gotcha.
Sure, I mean,
You know,
yeah,
I mean,
it is.
there you are. You know, you when you say, you know, when you go to kill the king, make sure you kill him, right?
That's right. Make
She
sure
went
you
after the
kill him.
king with like a, you know, I don't know, like a spitball,
Yeah.
and she was way exposed. She wasn't careful. You know, you're going out into major political battle, little Fulton County GA against the entire GOP and MAGA
Yeah.
world. You better come proper, and she didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of very interesting theories of cases against Donald Trump so far. Yeah. I don't know if you guys, do you have any update on our friend Luigi Mangione, who is
Yeah. We've got updates. He's now in New York. He arrived surrounded by enough weaponry to take out 5 or 6 major high schools. It was like you would have thought that they were transporting, you know, Donald Trump's favorite person, Hannibal Lecter, with their several AR-15s. I mean, it was ridiculous, all the shackles and everything. But anyway, the world's most dangerous CEO killer arrived in New York. They've not only has the local prosecutor Alvin Bragg larded up this case to the point where there's an op-ed in today's Times saying that they've jeopardized the case by overcharging. They charged him as a terrorist, not just as a murderer. But now the feds are getting in on the act, and they're hitting him up with federal charges on the grounds that he traveled to New York from Georgia in order to do this killing, and somehow that justifies it being like cross-state line stalking, I guess technically. Everyone wants their bite of the apple.
Yeah.
I mean, and all this is doing, I think, is having the effect of turning him into an even bigger folk hero.
That's right.
I am curious, what is the threshold for terrorism? You know, like, what is it? Because clearly, you know, like he in his statement here, he says these parasites had it coming, you know, and I'm the first to face this problem with such brutal honesty, right? So he is clearly going after Brian Thompson as an avatar of the disgusting U.S. healthcare industry, as we've spoken about in the past. I mean, is that enough? I'm curious if anyone has off the top of their head, you know, to say like, I'm trying to terrorize a group of people because I think they deserve to be terrorized. Is that enough to bring terrorism charges?
Not according to this attorney who was writing in the op-ed, and I thought he wrote pretty persuasively. He's worked both for defense and for prosecution cases. I mean, New York passed its current anti-terrorism statute in the days after 9/11. And, you know, we all know the definition of terrorism, right? It's political violence in order to persuade or threaten a population of people. It could be a big population or a small population, into changing their political stand on something. Well, I mean, is this that? I mean, you know, conducting a political assassination is not necessarily an act of terrorism. Lee Harvey Oswald, I don't think, was a terrorist. I don't think the guy who shot Trump's ear off was a political terrorist. I mean, you know, it's like it's an act of political violence is not terrorism by definition. I mean, you know, 9/11 was a terrorist act because it was an act that was an attempt to get the United States to withdraw from Saudi Arabia and from the Middle East, and possibly stop supporting Israel and so on. And there were statements that came out from Al Qaeda calling for that. There was nothing like that. No public statement was ever issued by Luigi Mangione. Right. I mean, if he hadn't been arrested, we might never know what the motive of this act was. For that reason alone, I don't think it qualifies.
You know, I say I teach a graduate school class at the University of Salamanca in Spain. And I say that my own definition of terrorism is the act of committing political violence to instill a feeling of terror in the civilian population. And that just didn't happen here. This was not meant to instill terror in the civilian population. This was an attempt to
instill joy.
Yeah, that's what happened. Yes, it instilled joy in a great part of the civilian population.
And many T-shirt designs.
I think this is really, really a stretch to charge him with not just a federal charge, but a federal charge that carries the death penalty.
They're insane.
I mean, and it's not going to be just him, right? I mean, we saw the first, I don't know if there have been more, but this was sort of right after we spoke last time. There was this woman in Florida who was apparently having a dispute with Blue Cross Blue Shield, who said, you people are next, delay, deny, depose, you people are next.
Right.
And she, the last I saw, I'm a couple of days old now on this story, but the last I saw, she was being charged with terrorism.
It's nuts. Well, just a few years ago, a group of anti-fossil fuels protesters went into the headquarters lobby of an oil company in Oklahoma, went up to a walkway overlooking the lobby, unfurled a banner, and threw glitter. And they were charged with terrorism. Now, the charges eventually were dismissed, and they were charged with like littering or something, stupid.
Sparkly terrorism.
Yeah. But we've got to put the brakes on this craziness. We've already gone over and above. This is nuts.
It takes us back to Georgia and using RICO cases.
That's right.
Because that's what they were trying to do against the Cop City protesters in Atlanta, trying to rope in anybody who donated $17 to some forest kitchen, or for banner making materials to suggest that they're part of some racketeering conspiracy to commit terrorism. Yes. If somebody else who donated to that same fund did some kind of criminal mischief, committed an act of vandalism or sabotage or whatever. Yeah, it is outrageous.
Indeed.
I mean, is there anything that can be done about this overcharging shit? I mean, it goes back, it goes down to the very lowest levels of
it's a very effective strategy.
I got arrested in 1984 with my dumb roommate who was smoking weed in our car in college in Massachusetts, Boxford, Massachusetts. And what did they have us on? They really just had us on the fact that when we lowered the window, giant clouds of pot smoke came out of the window. And
it's the 80s version of Alice's Restaurant.
Exactly. And they added all these stupid charges. And my favorite one was driving without a valid Massachusetts driver's license. Now, I had a valid New York license. I was the driver. And the cop said, oh, we just put that on everything for if you're out of state, just to fuck with you. And I'm like,
that's not your job.
And it's like, well, don't.
Yeah.
I mean, how about charging people with, it's sort of like these 34 counts that Trump faced, he was convicted of, right, by Alvin Bragg in these records cases. I mean, come on, we know this is one crime, right? I mean, one, the hush money payment, maybe two, there's two discrete offenses, but larding on the counts over and over, that shouldn't be allowed. This is just a way to make sure that everybody cops a deal and they don't exercise their right to defend themselves in court because they're overwhelmed by, the deluge. It's not fair. It's not. I don't think this is what the founding fathers or the charters of the Magna Carta had in mind.
No, and it doesn't help anyone. Again, it goes back to like the only thing our justice systems offers is punishment. That's all it offers. And punishment doesn't do anything. Like it clearly isn't a deterrent. It doesn't make anybody whole. It doesn't actually do anything for victims. So it just
doesn't instill any respect for the system.
No, yeah, it just coerces people who are, who don't have enough money to pay huge legal fees, and as you say, coerces people into taking pleas.
Even if you do have money to defend yourself, indefinitely, they still, they're like, well, if you plead guilty, we'll give you 2 years. If not, they'll be very angry at you, and then it'll be 20 years. And it's like, I mean, come on.
Yeah. So it just works.
You shouldn't be punished for defending yourself. You have the right to defend yourself.
Yeah, it's outrageous. All right. What else we got? I just keep wanting to go back to my little tidbits of NDAA amendment. So if you guys have anything else that you want to get to,
do it.
Holler at your girl.
Go for it.
All right. Well, let me get your thoughts on this one. Oh, this one is just from our girl Nancy Mace. I think producer Ben might especially have a chuckle about this. Prohibits funds to be authorized or made available for the DoD to be used in building, maintaining, or repairing a pier off the coast of Gaza or to transport aid to such a pier. That one actually, I guess, was so important. It got like an amendment to whatever, clarify the language, but making real sure no one is going to build a really expensive pier off the coast of Gaza that will definitely not be used to get any meaningful aid to anyone in Gaza. Hilarious.
That's so hilarious. I mean, didn't the old pier just like wash away?
It's gone.
Yeah. It just broke up in the waves.
I don't even know. I don't know if Nancy Mace is opposed to this because she doesn't want any aid to get to Gazans, or just because she, agrees with us that the pier was a stupid
no more piers.
Waste of money and distraction. Yes.
No more piers.
She's a pierophobe. She's peerless in her peer phobia.
Also, apparently, no funds are to be used to promote the idea of a one country, two systems solution for Taiwan.
What?
Huh.
No. Yeah, that one struck me, because that seems like
Shouldn't that be Taiwan's decision?
Yes, number one, should be. Two, it is odd that we continue to act as though it is our stated position as a country that Taiwan is independent when it is definitely not.
Yeah.
Right.
And we already what we adhere to is a sort of one country, two systems policy with regard to Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That fiction is very strange. I still want to know how this plays out if China ever decides to, I would say, go into Taiwan would be the way to put it, since we would not view it as an invasion legally under our version of international law. How exactly would defending Taiwan be marketed to the American people? We have to go and defend this country that we don't recognize diplomatically as a country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we want your sons to die doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, not going to work.
There's another one from our old friend Dan Crenshaw this one is actually kind of chilling. Requires a report from the Secretary of Defense on Mexican military action against Mexican drug cartels, Mexican military capabilities, and DoD operational plans to defeat Mexican drug cartels with varying degrees of coordination and cooperation from the Mexican government. So he wants a report on how the Pentagon is planning to or envisions attacking Mexican drug cartels.
With maybe no cooperation or very limited cooperation from the Mexican government. In other words, will the United States invade Mexico for what, the 138th time or whatever it would be?
Yeah, I didn't like that.
No.
I mean, I guess it's still just a report. And yeah, varying degrees of cooperation. That reminds me of the great chart that the Wall Street Journal ran the other day. It had a very helpful article telling people why your blood pressure reading is probably inaccurate. Just sort of saying what we all know, if you're talking, it's not going to be accurate, or if your arm's in the wrong position or whatever. But then it had this chart showing normal, elevated, and like dangerous readings, but normal encompassed 0. It was 0 to like 120 systolic or diastolic.
0 is a serious problem.
I mean, death is normal, I guess. So
it's actually the most normal state.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
I had this blood clot at the beginning of 2024. You guys might remember, and I was in the hospital for a week. And when I had to go by ambulance, unfortunately. And when I arrived, my blood pressure was 88/52. Oof. And the doctor told me the next morning that 50 for the lower number is death. So I would say that 0 is kind of not normal.
It's bad.
I was, yeah.
So you're just sitting around on a morgue table. You're at 50?
That's right.
That's the baseline.
Oh, here's another one. I'm sort of curious. Well, I'm curious both your takes on this. I feel like, John, you might have a little bit of insight here. One last amendment revokes the security clearances to retired or separated civilian or military DoD personnel that engage in lobbying for certain Chinese companies.
Certainly.
Interesting.
So I feel like, I'm not surprised to see sort of the anti-China bits and bobs popping up here, being layered on. But I do think that, I think probably most Americans don't really understand how security clearances maintain after you are separated from government work. and might not
and
like
they
it.
do.
Yeah. And so the sort of what's not being said here is all of these recently separated Pentagon officials who go on to lobby for Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Qatar are all, I guess, maintaining these active high-level
Yes.
security clearances.
You might
And
remember.
now I know that, well, I guess I was just going to say, I guess that doesn't necessarily mean that you're still getting all these briefings on the regular.
Correct. But you do have access to classified information in the course of your job, which is kind of dangerous. I wrote an op-ed 8 years ago when Donald Trump was first elected, and he got into this feud with John Brennan and Phil Mudd and a couple of other former agency guys who had all gone into the private sector, but maintained top secret SCI clearances. In fact, I even went on the Tucker Carlson show to talk about this. What you have to do when you leave government is find a company, usually a defense contractor, that can, quote unquote, hold your clearance. So in order to hold a clearance, it has to be cleared by the FBI or DOD. It has to have a secure conference room where you can carry on a classified conversation. And it has to have safes that are approved by DOD, FBI, or CIA that are fortified that will allow the storage of classified documents. That's all fine and good. But if you're not working for the government, if you're lobbying for Saudi Arabia, or in the case of John Brennan, sitting on the board of directors of Fordham University, why in blazes do you need a top secret SCI, SITK gamma security clearance? You shouldn't have one.
You really shouldn't. I understand, wanting to maintain
Sure.
a pool of advisors.
Sure.
But surely that can be a sort of more selective pool.
That's
Just
right.
everybody continuing to have access to this stuff,
Appoint
regardless of what company.
Yeah, appoint somebody to the president's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, the PIFIAB, or appoint him to some presidential committee or something. And there are a million ways you could do it. But if the likes of John Brennan maintain a top secret security clearance and are lobbying for a foreign government and are appearing as a paid talking head for MSNBC or anybody else, they should not have a security clearance.
Yeah, they should just be, isn't it kind of like when you leave a company, like when you leave the CIA,
right?
You take your ID card, right?
Yes.
Or it stops working.
Yeah.
You don't just get to walk around the halls.
No.
I don't understand. It's very strange.
Okay. There is a sort of interesting ongoing story about RFK. RFK, if he wants to take on certain medical research, is going to have to take on the CIA, which is an interesting sort of thread to follow, but I haven't followed it yet, so I'm not going to talk about it. But I'm going to try and bring something before you guys on it at some point.
Yeah, this is going to be a problem for him, especially when it comes to these labs, right? Because these labs at least partly fall under the jurisdiction of HHS. Because they're generally, CDC related. They're also under the jurisdiction of the Pentagon. And so,
also, the thing that brought this to my mind was that one of the, okay, now we're having a conversation, but I only know the very briefest outlines of it. But basically it was, yes, all of these labs are, that are doing this research are getting a bunch of money, soliciting money from the Pentagon, but also apparently, I think it was EcoHealth Alliance, was making proposals to In-Q-Tel for money for funding some of its projects. And so I guess, yeah, sure, I can see that the Pentagon would have an interest in funding biotech research to whatever. Like the fig leaf is always that we are trying to find antidotes to chemical weapons or whatever. We're not making the weapons, sure, whatever. But why would the intelligence, why would the CIA's investment fund have any interest?
Good question.
In viral research?
Good question.
Yeah. But again, I can't get into any, maybe there is an answer to that I haven't seen yet because I just saw that and thought, ooh, what an interesting topic. I'm going to research that more and definitely not talk about it today. The other interesting story that I know we all saw this week was about, another story about how fucking terrible it is to try to buy or maintain a house in the United States. It was this story in the Times about insurers dropping homeowners whose houses weren't before in areas that were, thought to be too dangerous to insure because of things like fires or floods or hurricanes, but now are. And so once again, like, who is going to pay the price for what, at least in this story, is being framed as the consequences of climate change? It is going to be, individual Americans who have saved up and purchased an asset, the big asset that you can use to try to achieve some kind of financial security, that now if you can't insure, you probably cannot sell.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because the problem is that, so there's all these places, particularly in, like, say, the high desert of Eastern California, the Eastern Coast, interestingly, more so than the western part of North Carolina, given recent events, pretty much the entire state of Florida. Mm-hmm. And this map is only going to continue to grow. Northern California, north of Sacramento and San Francisco, is also like a deep red zone here. And basically, the problem is, if you buy a house cash, doesn't matter if you buy it, but if you need a mortgage, like most buyers do, you can't get a mortgage without getting homeowners insurance. The bank requires that. So you're not going to be able to buy, which means the only people who can buy in these counties, which are getting more numerous all the time, and that map is going to keep expanding, is going to, and not to mention insurance companies are in more and more trouble because they're having to pay out more damage claims all the time. You're going to have people stuck with homes that they can't sell, as you said. And if you do have the cash to buy a home, do you want to buy a house that you can't get insurance for? Right. Not even partly. So, what's the effect here? The effect is that we already have a housing market that's frozen up. Now you have vast sections of the country, including in places like central Oklahoma, that are going to have, you're going to have housing prices that are going to start to decline, and probably pretty precipitously, and it's going to drag the whole thing down. You could end up with sort of a climate change version of the subprime mortgage crisis that tanks the entire economy within the next couple of years. It's pretty crazy how extreme things have gotten. I was thinking about that recently, about how, I used to, when I moved to New York City in 1981 as a freshman in college, when we still called them freshmen instead of first years. And I had a job that I got through one of my roommates, breaking up ice at the New York Coliseum at Columbus Circle. And basically, when it would start snowing and sleeting and rain and ice storming, we'd get on the subway, rush down there. They paid like a ridiculous amount of money. And before, the crowds come in, we want to make sure everything is like completely cleared away, keep clearing it away. The point is, that was from November to March, that was a 3-time, 4-time, 5-day-a-week job. That would be a 0-day job now. It never snows, never ice storms, ever in New York anymore. The New York Coliseum is gone. It's the Time Warner Center now. But the point is, that's how much the climate has changed. There were days that were 10 below zero. Those days are never to be seen again. You're not going to see a 15-degree day or a 20-degree day anymore. If it's below 30 ever, it's shocking. These are big changes. And, and it's going to have massive economic impact, and the government's not doing anything to prepare for it.
No. And the only thing the government is doing to, we were talking about a commercial real estate crisis before the pandemic, but now I was walking around downtown with my mom the other day, and she was commenting on how dead it was in downtown DC.
Yeah.
And, it's afternoon, people are working, it's holiday season, whatever. But yeah, nobody's in those buildings, or not nearly as many people. And yet, instead of sort of coming up with a beneficial way to use all of this real estate that is not being used for its original purpose, what everyone, I guess, is hoping Donald Trump is going to do, what I guess Republicans are hoping Donald Trump is going to do, is just order federal workers back. Maybe come out with some kind of executive order against remote work or something. Like, that's the solution. You have to just, God forbid we try anything.
That'll help Washington.
Yeah.
It won't do much for New York or Miami or LA or San Francisco.
No. And so we'll have like a a crisis of value brought on by this insurance issue that we were just talking about, simultaneously with a crisis of value in this sort of unused real estate. And in the meantime, you have a record-breaking homeless population, the people who find it impossible to buy houses, and you have these buildings sitting empty, and then people potentially being unable to sell their homes.
People are sleeping outside of empty buildings.
Oh, it's disgusting. It's disgusting.
Awful.
Yeah. Do we have one more NDAA tidbit? I'm not sure if any of these were really that good.
We've done an hour, maybe a little more than an hour.
Yeah. Oh, did you see also yeah, it's an hour, I think. We finally have an emergency somewhere over bird flu.
Yeah. The first serious case.
Well, no, we have California declaring an emergency.
Right.
Not because of serious human cases, but because of how many of its dairy herds are infected. And then you have, the first severe case in the US, but which seems to, that I think is in Louisiana, but that seems to have come from, that is a person who got it from birds.
2 cats have died of bird flu.
2 cats have died.
Well, now I care.
I care too, deeply.
Yeah. I mean, I was glad to see, have been a lot more cases because of people getting infected, like dairy workers getting infected from cows they don't know are sick, because so far testing herds is still totally voluntary. But all of those illnesses seem to be not very severe. And it still seems to be, at least anecdotally, seems to be the case that the severe illness comes from getting it from a bird. If it passes through a cow, you're okay. So, I mean, I don't know. I think there'll be people pointing the finger at California. I'm sure California has its own testing regime, which is why it's found so many infected herds and wants to throw some money at testing so you can at least track this problem, which is honestly something that the federal government probably should have done a year ago. Except I guess everybody was too scared to. I don't know. They were scared of people yelling at them that they were going to lock them down over H5N1 or something, which is ridiculous. So they just decided we're just not going to pay any attention to this thing at all and cross our fingers and hope nothing bad happens. All right. Is that it for us?
I think so.
I think so.
All right. I guess deprogramming's done for the day, but we'll be back. Bye.